Hello, I'm Gem Hawks and today I'm going to be looking at Jessie James Bead's Fancy Glass Daggers. Now if, like myself, you bought a strand and all you wanted to do was this, because they're so beautiful, then I have got a lovely alternative for you today, just to show you how you can highlight one or even all of those dagger beads, if that is your preference. If you'd like to join me down at the board, I'm going to show you the project that we can work up today, and then we'll talk about some of the options that you have available. So I have here half a strand of the Fancy Glass Daggers in the silver colourway. So you get more than this on a strand, you get double this amount virtually. And what I want to do is show you an idea to highlight one or more of those dagger beads in a really cool and potentially elegant way. So let's bring in the piece that we're going to create together today. Slide those beads up to the corner for a moment, and this is the piece that I elected to create with my half strand of dagger beads. Now I used 7 in this piece and I have 8 remaining on the strand, so altogether you're going to get 15 in that strand, and they are utterly glorious. Now I'm using 2 different types and gauges of wire today. I've gone for raw copper round, and the main bar and the surround for the dagger bead is 18 gauge, which is equivalent to 1mm, but I've also used a little extra 0.5mm or 24 gauge wire to create an interesting weave on this central segment. Now you could very simply create this central piece and make that 15 times over. That would be really cool, and then just strand that with lots and lots of beads into your design. What I chose to do was to elevate the central one with its own little bit of extraness, and then I added in a couple of beads left over from my Earl Grey Mini mix, which are the beads that are going across and at the centre top here. And then I added on a chain reaction. The one that I've used today is number 14, which has got a really nice AB coated blue crystal rondelle in it as well. And I've just added in a Jessie James toggle at the back there. So what I want to teach you today is this central section, which has got a really cool and interesting weave that I have named Ballet Slipper weave. And I'm going to show you how to create that central piece. You will be able to see on one of my other bar necklace tutorials, which I'll pop into the description of today's video, how to complete the bar that runs across the centre, and indeed how to thread all of these beads on. What you should take note of though right now is that all of these cool glass crystal dagger beads have gone very easily onto that 18 gauge wire. There's no problem with the drill holes there at all. Really beautiful colourway as well. Kind of subtle. It's called silver. It is also available in a blush tone as well, but this is my absolute favourite of the dagger beads. Really beautiful. So I'm going to show you how to make the central piece on today's video, and then I will pop a link in for how to create a bar necklace, which will show you how to add these little coils on the end and add into your chain. So let's just pop that up and out of the way and into the corner, like so. Actually, do you know what? Before we get cracking, I think I'll show you that on the neckline. So you can see that they're quite impactful without anything happening to them at all. But I really like how this little bit of wire surround has elevated that central bead, and then I've added an equal number on either side, so 3 on either side, just to give that a little bit more pizzazz. You could just use them as they are, but this is an idea to give that a little bit more. So let's pop back down to the board and I'll show you how to create that central segment now. So to create the central feature for that beautiful glass fancy dagger, I've got around about 9 inches of that 18 gauge or 1mm wire. I'm working with raw copper because it looks nice on the camera, but you could choose a medium temper or another soft temper like this wire. So the first thing I'm going to do is to make sure that that's nice and smooth and warm. So I'm just running that between thumb and forefinger just to get a little bit of extra fluidity into the wire. If you're working with a semi-hard wire, you will absolutely need to do this a little bit more. So in the centre of that approximately 9 inches of wire, we are going to put ourselves a really nice sharp angle. So I'm going to take the very, very tip of my bent chain nose pliers and put a bend into that wire. Now it's not exactly halfway, but it doesn't really matter. What I want to happen down here is for a really sharp bend to accentuate the beautiful point that you get on these dagger beads. So to do that, what I'm going to do is open and close down at that angle and just switch from one side to the other as I do that. And this will enable me to get really nice sharpness to that dagger shape down at the base. So you can just open and close that a couple of times, and as you draw the wire back out, you'll see that you've got a slightly sharper point than you had a moment ago. Now before we move on any further, I am going to be doing a little light hammering today. I've got a mini steel block, you can see my camera array up there, and a very, very light standard chasing hammer. You could use a ball peen hammer and just stick to the flat side, or the slightly domed side. It's absolutely up to you. What I'm wanting to do is add a little bit of strength and rigidity to the wire once we've formed that shape. But also you may notice that I've added a great deal of texture by using the sharp side of the hammer as well. And I will talk you through that as we get there. So what I want to do is to basically chase around the form. It can be slightly sharper if you want it to be. It adds a little bit of drama and length and size to the piece. And what we're needing to do next is to replicate where the angle changes on the bead, on the wire. If you draw that up too tightly, you won't be able to enclose the bead. So make sure that you do have enough space to enclose the bead in the shape you're creating. So if I leave that down on the board for a second, pop those pliers in and then draw it up slightly. What I'm going to do is put a sharp bend all the way past where I need to go and then draw that back out. So I'm going to grip that very, very firmly before drawing the long tail of wire up. There's a little bit of a bend in it at the moment, but I will solve that momentarily. What I'm looking to do is to make sure that this length of wire between those two angles is longer than the length between the tip at the bottom of the dagger and where the angle changes up here. So that looks pretty good to me. And to solve the issue of this slight bend in the wire, I'm just opening and closing my pliers over that wire in this orientation. So the two flat sides are coming from the left and the right of the wire rather than from the top and the bottom. What I then need to do is replicate the bend on the second side. Now the smart money goes to people who are going to measure that distance. I'm going to eyeball it for today, and then I can fix any minor issues that don't seem to fit. So if I just put a basic bend in first, I'm going to see if that looks pretty good. It does look pretty good. You could simply use a rule and get that straight. Now you can see the difference between the bends. The first bend we made, we took far past where we want the angle to be and then drew it back again. This one we just took to the point. So that's the reason. If I pop those pliers back in, I will take the wire far past where I want it to sit, and then I will draw it back again. Again, we've got that little notch in the wire, which is a very easy solve. Just going to open and close the pliers in the upright so that the left side of the wire and the right side of the wire are being squished to make sure that that's nice and straight. What we will then do is just manually adjust these side angles until your bead will fit inside your shape that you're creating. Now, because I want to hammer this segment of wire just down around the lower edges, I'm not worried about marking my wire at all. If you're working on a design and you want to keep that nice and smooth, you may wish to go slightly more carefully. For me, I want to hammer this anyway, so any tool marks are not going to be a problem. So I'm going to drop that over the dagger bead and see how things are fitting. So you can see here that I need to open up those two side wires ever so slightly to accommodate the dagger bead. Now fortunately, raw copper wire is quite affordable, as is the German style wire that you may have in your stash. We're only working with 9 inches at a time, so my advice if you wanted to recreate this with precious metals later is practice on your inexpensive wires first to make sure that you're happy with how the process moves through. So I'm absolutely delighted with how that's fitting around the dagger bead. So because we're working with glass, I'm going to pop that very carefully out of the way before I drop my steel block in. You can absolutely see my camera array and probably bits of my ceiling there. It's quite good fun, really. The hammer I'm using is an incredibly affordable jeweller's hammer. Wasn't very expensive at all. It's very, very lightweight, because if I use my heavy hammer and my heavy block here, the whole array will shake. What I need to do is not put too much pressure on where those two wires cross over. So I'm taking those off the edge of the block, and I'm going to put my finger to just hold that in position. I'm interested in retaining these three angles here, here and here. So we're going to be hammering flat to begin with. And if you flip the design over, what you will see is that you get a really silky, satiny effect from your steel block. These sometimes need a bit of a rub down and a bit of an oil. That will help you to retain that nice satin finish. If that is the effect that you're going for, then stick with that. If I just pop the bead in for a second, it matches beautifully. You've got a very high luster faceted bead. And then you've got a nice shine, but a good solid, now very, very strong shaped piece of wire surround. If I pop that back out, flip it back over to the back again, I'm going to show you a way in which you can add texture if you wish to. So you can, if you have a hammer like this, use the bar on the one side. To add what can look in some lights like a diamond faceting. If you have a ball peen hammer which has a really smooth dome on the other side, you can use the edge of the flatter side of your hammer like so. If you do have a really lovely domed hammer, you can get that beautiful effect that you see on beaten metal vases and bowls, where you've got dimples all over. So there's lots of different ways that you can add a little bit of texture and a little bit of strength to your design. Again, you can simply just use the satin side if you prefer. So let's pop that dagger bead back in and see how we're looking. You may or may not notice that the design spreads slightly when we hammer it, so it is just a tiny bit further away than it used to be, which is absolutely fine because I want to be able to have a little bit of motion in this design. So the next thing that we're going to do is to turn some upright bends on those side wires, and I want that angle change to occur at the point where the drill hole up at the top of the dagger bead occurs. So you can pinch the design together, slide those bent chain nose pliers into the point where that drill hole goes through the bead, take the bead away, pinch very, very firmly and then turn an upright. And then you can estimate using your eyeballs or again a set of rulers if you have them, just to get a little upright. So if I gently pinch the design together now, you'll see that angle change. If we pop the bead back into position, that angle change occurs at the point the drill hole is at the top of the bead. We just want a little bit of warmth up at the top here. And then we're just going to make sure that those are reasonably straight and a little bit like tram lines. So they should be coming side by side, the same distance apart all the way along. I'm now going to add in a second segment of wire. Let's get those pliers out of the way for a second. And I've opted for a slightly heavier fine wire today. This is 24 gauge or 0.5mm. So I'm going to take, this is about 8 inches, and this is plenty to do the ballet slipper weave, as I call it. You don't have to do that. I will show you a way in which you can simply truncate having seated your bead. So my bead is sitting in the centre of that lighter gauge wire. Again, it's around about 8 inches and it's 24 gauge or 0.5mm. So I'm going to sight the bead at the point where the angle change occurs, and I'm going to take tail on one side. It's over the top of the frame. It's over the top of the frame on the other side. So they are sitting equally. I'm going to take the tail all the way around the wire that is upright on the right hand side, and I'm going to wrap that a good 6 or 7 times. I want this piece of jewellery to last a long time, so I'm going to add some strength, And then once I've got those wraps into position, I'm just going to tighten up very cautiously, and you'll see I approach the bead with the rounded side of my pliers and just get that coil to sit down neatly. I think I've gone for 6 turns there, so I will want to reflect that same number on the other side. You can always add one if you miscount at this stage. So that's 3 and 4, 5, and then we're going to finish with the wire sticking out to the side. Let's see if that looks similar. If not, I will take an extra coil on the right hand side. It's helpful if you're counting. I obviously counted wrong because they don't look, no, they are the same. It's all good, all good. So what we're going to do now is, if you wanted to have a simplistic design without the ballet slipper, you could simply take the wire to the back of the design, trim it away and smooth those ends down. If you want to take it a step further and add a ballet slipper weave to the top of your dagger bead, what I'm going to do is take the right hand wire up the centre of the design, make sure it's nice and tight to the coil. You can quickly just give that a tiny squeeze, and then I'm going to draw that over at 45-degree angle from the right hand side underneath, up the middle, so it goes over the top of the left hand side. And I'm just going to pinch that into position with my non-dominant hand and weave 3 times, or wind rather, 3 times around the left hand upright. And when I've taken that 3rd coil around, I'm going to draw the wire up and leave it sticking up like so for a moment. What I need to do now is take the wire that is sitting on the left hand upright, draw that all the way across the back, and then slide it up the centre of the 2 wires, cross it over again at 45 degrees and wrap 3 times around the right hand side of that frame wire. So we're looking for that to sit neatly. What you may need to do is flip that over and just tidy that coil up at the back. Again, being very respectful of your beads. If you're going to go close to the bead, use the curved side, you're much less likely to damage it, or if you have good control, you can cover that bead up and just tighten the coil up. I'm going to flip this back to the front. So the wire that was on the left hand upright has travelled behind the first diagonal wire, and it's now coming over the top of the right hand wire. So they're always going to be travelling diagonally and from underneath to over the top. So if I pinch that weave into position, I'm now going to wrap 3 times around the right hand upright and then leave that wire in a sticky uppy position. Make sure that those coils are nice and neat and tidy before repeating the process. So if you want this to look exactly the same, what you will need to do is think about where the wires are crossing. So in order to replicate the design, I'm going to take the left hand wire, what is sitting on from the left hand side to the right hand side. I'm going to make sure that these 2 sit equal and opposite. I'm going to take that to 45 degrees, pinch the design and wrap 3 times around that right hand upright, leaving the wire in the upright position in the centre and making sure that those coils are neat and tidy before drawing the wire that is sitting on the right hand upright over the top and across, and you'll see we've replicated the order in which the wires cross. Pinch that into position so that it sits on the left hand upright in the same position, and then wrap 3 times around that left hand upright, finishing with the wire sticking up. So this is the ballet slipper weave as I refer to it. Stick those wires in the upright position, draw the coils in nice and neat and tidy, like so. And you can repeat that as many or as few times as you need to. So you might just need to take a second to get those to sit equal and opposite, and a few seconds to just tidy up those little coils as you go. So you can continue for as much wire as you have available, as long or as short as you want to go. So what I'm going to do is draw the wires across to the back and show you how to finish off. Like I say, you've got another good couple of crosses in there, and we're looking to keep these 2 stronger, heavier gauge wires as close to parallel as possible. When you've gone as far as you wish to go, what we're going to do is flip that over to the back, trim the wire away just a little bit past the point at which it crosses the heavier gauge wire so that we can pinch very firmly and just draw that last tiny sticking up bit of wire around so that it truncates in between those two parallel wires up at the top there. So you could go for 3 wraps, you could go for 4 wraps, or you could replicate the number that you did at the bottom in 6 wraps. So let's just get rid of those 2 little scraps of that wire, and we'll have a quick look at where we've got to. What we need to do now is put forward bends on our 2 upright bars. This is the front because we set our dagger over the top of those guide wires. What you can do now is, if you have them, straight edged pliers are great for this. It means that you can put a forwards bend in exactly the same place, or you can do that individually. For speed and expediency, I've just done that really quickly. Next, you will use your round nose or your bail making pliers to create very small loops. Now, if you're a stickler, you absolutely can create these as wrapped loops. However, this is not a heavy design, and if you pinch the wire once you've created an open and closable loop, it's going to last really nicely anyway. So we don't need a huge amount of space, so I'm going to use the number 1 on my bail making pliers that are stepped bail making pliers. I'm going to pop the wire in between and rotate the pliers around until I get a small loop, taking that tail all the way across the back. I'll show you again on the other side. If I trim this wire out of the way first, we might actually stand a better chance of seeing it. So once you've created your loop, I'm going to cut that wire, the little tail off, using the flush side of my cutters, just at the point where it meets the first angle we created. So let me turn that over to the other side. And again, I'm going to be using the smallest loop. So I'm going to rotate the wire around until I get a shepherd's crook shape. Much easier to see when we're on the second one. And then I'm going to use the tail of the wire to draw that around to create that loop shape. And they need to be the same distance above the dagger bead on both sides. So at this point, again, we're going to trim away the wire where it crosses the angle, just here. Let's get that out of the way. Those are both usable lengths of wire. Clear the board. And then what we're going to do is make those loops complete just by gently and carefully opening and closing my flat facing, in this case bent chain nose pliers. A couple of times, that's added some real strength to it. Now you can simply thread this onto your beading material if you prefer, along with whatever beads you want to use. I'm using the residue from a pack of Earl Grey beads, which is one of our lovely mini mixes. And I found plenty in one that I'd already used part of the pack for another project, and there were plenty there to finish off. What I want to do is show you how to just sit that central bead if you're going to be adding this to a bar of wire. And I will again refer to a preceding tutorial that I've done with a bar necklace, just to show you how to finish that off if you wish to do that. But as a standalone piece, it's already pretty cool. So if you'd like to join me back down at the board, we'll just finish off the sighting of that new piece that we've made with the Ballet Slipper weave. So I have one of those offcuts that we just removed from the top end of our dagger bead assembly a moment ago. If you wanted to create a bar necklace like this, you can thread on all of your beads, wrapped loop and coil at either end. Again, I will put a video link in the description for you. But I just want to show you how you will be setting your assembly onto a section of wire. This again is 18 gauge or 1mm, and this bead comes from the Earl Grey Mini. So you'll see that I've added on the assembly to the bar. What I want to do is to sight a bead up at the top, like so. So I'm going to draw the wire back out from the second of those loops, and I'm going to add the bead into position, and then very carefully draw the wire back through, and then post it through the gap in that second loop that we created. And that's the basics of setting as a bar. And then you can see with this piece that I made before our tutorial today, I've added on some beads and some supplementary dagger beads to go with. So you could create them all in exactly the same way and put a very gentle curvature into that wire so that they splay out. So you've got multiple versions of this. You could even play around with starting in the centre with 7 crisscrosses on the ballet slipper, up to 5 crisscrosses, up to 3 crisscrosses, up to just 1 crisscross, and in that way you'll get a beautiful graduation on the design. So there's lots of different ways that you can use this single technique to create completely unique jewellery to yourself. And as I say, on the strand you get 15. I've used 7 in this piece. We've demonstrated with 1. I've still got 7 dagger beads to play with. And just to confirm that I've been using the Earl Grey Mini Mix to add in some detail. And chain reaction number 14, which is this one. Slightly blue AB coating on those rondelles, but I think it looks nice with the silver colourway anyway. Well, thanks very much for hanging out with me today. I've had a great time with these beautiful fancy glass dagger beads in silver. Have yourself a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye for now.